and I will be your host today. Before the webinar, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about this webinar. First, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session through the same link you are using right now. Also, recording will be shared shortly after the webinar. Second, please feel free to send any questions in the Q&A box. We will be answering your question at the end of the session. If you don't get answered during the webinar, we will follow up afterwards. Now, I will hand over to Paul to begin the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much. So let's start. Okay, so I apologize beforehand because it's a bit of an architectural change, DXA 2, so the demo's not quite as exciting as it may be, but let's start. And to begin with, we'll look at the data model. So hopefully my screen is shared and you can all see it. So let's first preview. I'll go as slowly as I can so it doesn't, you're not lagging behind me. So the first thing is the old legacy DD4T data model. So I've just gone to the old example website and done a preview, and hopefully you can see what should be familiar to you all, which is the JSON that's produced by the old template building blocks to produce, which uses DD4T to produce this JSON. And you can see it's quite verbose, and we covered that yesterday. So hopefully there's nothing new there. Okay, so now I'm going to now show you what it looks like with the new R2 data model. Preview. I'll bring these side by side. Okay, so hopefully you can see this, and it looks quite different, really. But it's very it's what you'd expect if you was to serialize the view model directly. So you can see the regions, the entities of the region, and the content of each. And there's also some other things as well. There's the type information, which allows the deserialization to know what objects to create. And you'll know that will be important later. But you can see it's a lot smaller than, it's probably easy if I show you this view. You can see that the difference in size is dramatic. I mean, it's the old DD4T data model is much larger. And that's because it's got a lot of information that's kind of not required by DXA. So you've got XPaths and so on and so forth. So that's rough. So now, okay, so the DXA web application, it's dealing directly with this R2 JSON, and this is the stuff that gets returned by the model service. So when so DXA 2 can work with both legacy and R2, and it does this by when it requests the data from the model service, it always specifies to return it in R2 format. So if you published your site in legacy using the DD4T templates, then when DXA runs, it always requests from the model service to return R2, and therefore you get the R2 data. So that way we can strip out all the old code that was done in the data model builder that got all the content from DD4T and then built the view models, and so now it just works with the DXA2 data model regardless of the publication that was published. Okay, so let's close these. We will look at the so I'll show you an example template building block in the new R2. And you can see that there is a new parameter for the template which is called Model Builder Type Names. And then this is a list of Model Builder classes that get run to build the final data model, which at the end gets serialized to this JSON. So the first one is the one that does virtually all the work. But you can see there's a few extra ones that you can chain along. And so the default model builder basically converts the Tridion content model into the R2 data model. And the ones that follow it kind of enrich that data model. And the model that's produced by the first one in the chain gets passed along, and they can each add or remove stuff from the data model, and then finally it gets serialized. So by doing this, this is that new architecture I mentioned about the model builder pipeline. In a previous way, kind of legacy mode, we would have done this with different template building blocks. So you'd have had a template building block to build the data model, another template building block to build the external content library stuff, one for context expressions, and so on. But now it's all done with one template building block, and you just specify which ones you want to run. So an example of that would be, let's have a look. Okay, so I've got a test page here that has got some target group conditions on there, which I've specified. I've specified one. And we'll view the source of this. Okay. Scroll down, and we can see the R2 data model as expected. But there's also a property in here called extension data. And this extension data is effectively a dictionary of objects that can contain anything you like. So you can extend the data model with custom types. And you can see this is where the type property comes in. And that's so the deserialization side on the web application knows what types to create. The model service doesn't, because these objects here aren't part of the core data model, the model service doesn't know what these types are, so it will ignore this type of stuff. And if we quickly look at the template building block that was used to create this, you can see that there's the model builder type names parameter again, default model builder, as you expect, but we've got a new one in there called add target groups model builder. And that's a new addition to DXA 2. It was originally done in DD4T by a separate template building block, and we could have kept the same approach, but to kind of like as an example to show how you can use the new mechanism to do the same thing, we've created a data model builder called add target groups. Okay, so I'll show you the code for that so you can see roughly how it works. Okay, so we've got the add target groups model builder. It's a data model builder, and if you're familiar with the model builder pipeline on the web application side of things, it's very, very much the same. Okay, and so that's the type name that you'd put in the parameter, and because it comes after the default data model. Okay, this is run every time there's an entity that gets and it gets past this entity model data, which is previously built by the previous data model in that chain. So that's now fully populated, and you can see where I then take all the target conditions, and then I add it to the extension data. And these target group conditions is a separate data model, not part of the core data model. So what we do is that allows you to extend the core data model with any object in any way you like. Okay, so but the only caveat to that is you also need to make sure that the web application knows about those types, because as I say, the model service will take that R2 data model, it will see stuff that it doesn't know about in the extension data, and it will effectively ignore it. But on the web application side of things, when you request the data from the model service and you get all that JSON back, someone has to deserialize it. That deserialization occurs, and you could either ignore it, again, the default one will ignore it because it doesn't recognize the types, or you have to register the types. I'll show you that. So if you looked in the DXA framework, there's the default model builder has a new method that you can override called resolve data model type, and this gets called when you so basically the JSON comes back from the model service, the model builder pipeline in the web application starts, and then it deserializes that JSON into a page model data or entity model data object, which is an intermediate data model. Well, it is the data model really, but it's the bit before the semantic mapping. So you start off with a page model data, then semantic mapping occurs, and then you end up with a final page model. And it's at this point where you can, if it doesn't recognize a type that's in that JSON, it will end up calling a resolve data model type, and you can specify what assembly and type name it maps to. Okay, and by default, the one that comes out of the box kind of refers to the types in this namespace, and you can see the target group. Hopefully, you can see the target group conditions, and you can see that condition class in that namespace. So that's a way of easily extending the core data model with anything added to the extension data, and then the web application can deserialize it, and everything's good. Okay, so I think that's that. So let me quickly show you the custom resolver, because we mentioned that briefly yesterday. So the custom resolver is used to automatically publish link components for you. So I've got an example here where, let's open this. So I've got an example component here which links to another component, which is this. This links to another component, and so on and so forth, all the way to the final one, linked list 7, level 7. So if you was to normally publish this, you'd have to remember to publish every one of these. But you can see if you look at the preview items to be published, it publishes 3 of them. And the reason for that is the new UI extension, which is in settings. See, there's the recursion depth. Now, although it's published 3 and you see 2 there, it's because the way it works, it's effectively looks 2 into the depth. Okay, so it's the one that you want to publish, and then 2 levels deep. Okay, that's why you see 3 items to be published. So if we change that to, let's say, -1, which is infinite, that will go all along the chain, hopefully. So there's that. We publish, and now you can see that because it's recursive, it's just going all the way along until it comes to the last link component. So now you don't have to remember to publish all the components separately. Now those components, they get a placeholder, just an ID basically in the JSON, and then the expansion occurs in the model service itself. So and this custom resolver is, you could set it to 0, or you could just remove it completely. It's a separate step, so you can disable it. There's a PowerShell script to remove it. and I think that's all there is to the data model side of things. I will now show you a bit of the caching part. So let me, first of all, I'll show you the web configuration. Okay, so here's the web config for the DXA web application, and you see a new section now called SDL.web.delivery with a caching section inside it. And it's within here that you can now specify all the different types of cache. You can have a null cache handler, which is effectively no cache, a default in-memory cache, which is what you'd expect, and then we have a Redis cache handler and a multi-level cache handler. So I spoke quite a lot about the distributed caching, so I'll show you that running in a second. And here are the regions. These are predefined regions within the SIL, which I added, and these are regions that are being created in DXA. So, for example, when it caches page models, all page models get cached with this region, and you can specify what cache you wish it to go to. So in this example, they're all using a distributed cache, which is pointing to my local host. So I'll just start up the Redis server. There we go. Let's open up the command line tool so we can see. If I look, I've got no keys at the moment, which is good. So I will quickly run the web application. I've got Fiddler running in the background so you can see the traffic that's going to the services. So it's running up. Bear with. Okay, so hopefully you can see all the traffic going to the SIL library, and I'll show you the traffic to the model service. Okay. So there is our classic home page that you all know and love. And you can see all the traffic to the discovery service, content service, and there's the one for the page model. Have a quick look at that so you can see what it looks like. See the JSON in a great format. Ooh. There you go. So you can see the JSON that gets returned from the model service is exactly the same as what you saw in the preview, which is what you'd expect. If I show you the request, you can see on the request there is a query parameter model type equals R2, and if you was to place DD14 instead of R2, this would return DD14 content. And that's how we do the backwards compatibility. So I'll talk about the DXA model service provider for DD14 in a second. Okay, so that's good. So hopefully though, we should see a load of keys in the Redis cache. So this is Redis, and you can see all the keys, and it's a bit confusing maybe. Hopefully you can see it. But let me bring up the region names, make it a bit clearer. So you can see entity model, page model, and some various other regions in there. So you can see rendered output, that's the page output cache, output rendering cache, sorry. Navigation. At the moment, you see I've sent them all to that. Apart from the internal SIL caching stuff, which uses these 4 regions, and that goes to a SIL internal cache, which is in memory cache. I'll just switch that over to regular distributed cache. By doing this, you'll see all the objects that the SIL library internally caches. So you can see clear. keys getting added, and there'll be a lot more now because the SDL library actually does a lot of caching. You can see there was like, what was it, 40 before, and now you've got like 125 or so. So that's pretty. So that's that. You can see that another part of it is the multi-level caching, which I mentioned as well yesterday, and here it is in practice. It literally is just, there's the level 1 cache, which is an in-memory cache. It's saying that any items that come and go into the cache, they stay in the in-memory cache for 5 seconds, and if they expire from the level 1 cache, then we get them from the caches listed here. You can put any number of caches here. You could have different instances of Redis running on various machines, and it times how long it takes to retrieve the item from the cache, and then changes the priority. So if I had like 4 caches here, and the first 3 were quite slow, and or maybe someone had killed them, and the last one in the list worked, then it would reorganize change the priorities of them, so the 4th one would be the first one it looked at. Once an item is retrieved from one of these caches, it then goes back into the level 1 cache. So you can see it's quite easy to set up, and it follows the same kind of like approach to all the others. Policies, absolute. There's a sliding expiration as well, but most people don't bother with that one. You've seen the resolver. Yeah. So if you look on NuGet, and you can see that the data model there. So that's the core data model. And then we've got this new DD4T provider model service. I'll show you that. Show you the code for it. Okay, so this uses part of the SDL library as well for doing like broker queries and so on. But for getting the page uses the model service, and you'll notice that it always requests data in the DD4T format, and that's why you can just drop this in as a replacement to the SDL provider in your DD4T applications, and run it against the model service, because that's kind of where we kind of like see the first kind of like steps to migration, really, is to use this DXA model service provider in your DD4T applications, and then that way you can then run against DD4T published content and R2 published content, and then hopefully the migration process is a lot easier. Yeah, that's pretty much it from the .NET side of things.
Yeah. So thank you, Paul, and thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. And if you have any other questions further, then please contact our speaker directly. And you will be receiving email with recording webinar. And we hope it is useful and informative to you. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.